welcome to the most excellent 80s movies podcast. It's the podcast where a filmmaker and a comedian watch their way through the 80s movies we think we love or might have missed with these, our modern grown up eyes, to find out if they hold up or if indeed they are not so very. This is Heather's, a movie selection from 1989.
All right. Unfortunately, that's incorrect. It's from 1988.
Oh, shit. This is Heather's, a movie selection from 1988.
Heather Chandler, Heather McNamara, Heather Duke, Veronica Sawyer.
Why are you such a mega brat? Because I can be.
The most powerful clique at Westerberg.
Hi, Veronica. Drool much?
Most people would die to get into it.
Heather number one just looked right at me.
I'm worshipped Westerberg, and I'm only a junior.
Veronica would kill to get out of it.
You were nothing before you met me. You were a Girl Scout cookie.
JD has come to answer her prayers.
I'm a no-rest build-up man myself.
We'll kill her.
He's got a way with women. A way with words.
Is this as good for you as it is for me?
Life and shock.
And a very special way with a gun. Veronica can't live with him.
No!
I love my dead gay son.
And she can't live without him.
Does this turn out weak or what? I had at least 70 more people at my funeral.
What?
Their meeting was destiny.
My life is filthy.
What do you think I'm gonna do with it? Take out her tonsils?
Their love has a body count.
I loved you. I was coming up here to kill you.
That's we're breaking up. Young love.
Heather's, a killer comedy.
A killer comedy. And I think, like, before we even talk about what happens in the movie, like, there has to be a whole lot of trigger warnings. This movie is full of suicide. There's gun violence in schools. There's date rape and other, like, really triggering content in this movie.
Yeah, trigger the movie.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh. Heather's. Okay. I'm Chrissy Lenz of the Neighborhood Comedy Theater, this podcast's comedian, and with me, as always, is filmmaker Nathan Blackwell.
Good evening. Glad to be here.
Yeah. So, Nathan, is this a movie that you have ever seen? Is this something you watched?
So, yeah. So I've seen it in the past. It was basically, you know how like boys will force like Marvel movies onto girls.
Sure.
This was a girl that forced this movie onto me, like with the preface of this is the best movie ever.
Okay. Like when it was out, or like
this was probably the mid 90s.
Mid-90s.
So
okay. So this
yeah,
is like
so
a hipster girl,
relatively recent.
being like, "Oh, you love this 80s movie. It's so empowering to women."
Subversive and dark.
Okay. Although I don't agree with your premise that girls don't like Marvel movies. I hear what you're saying.
Right. Well, I didn't say that.
Yeah, I definitely saw this movie also in high school, which would be like the mid to late 90s. And I remember liking it and quoting it, but it never like was in heavy rotation in the way that like Pretty in Pink and Breakfast Club were. And I think the trailer doesn't really paint a very accurate portrait with all the like sort of bouncy Tim Burton-y music, and they really highlight the moments where it is like an oddball, weird Tim Burton-y kind of fantasy, like where she's imagining things. And I don't think that that's a true and accurate vision of what this movie ends up being 30 something years later. So we see all of the Heathers well, we don't know they're the Heathers yet, but we see these, this clique of girls playing croquet while the very, like, sort of, I don't know, how would you describe it? Que Sera is playing, and these girls who are in their blazers with like shoulders for days, hats, big hair bows, and they just like they all look like they're dressed for a board meeting playing backyard croquet. But it is actually a dream sequence because they end up hitting Winona Ryder in the head. She's like buried up to her neck in the croquet pitch, so she's like dreaming and or fantasizing of the
Right.
three Heathers and how they mistreat her, although she is one of them.
Yeah, it gives us kind of a clue of what kind of movie we're in store for, and it's something that the movie does throughout, which is kind of intermixed, sort of like weave in these dream sequences. You're not sure because sometimes the story that's going on outside of the dreams is just as nutty.
It's one of many devices that this movie uses. So we have her dream sequences or fantasy sequences where she is imagining things. And then there's also her diary where she is out loud narrating to us her true feelings in her diary, which are in sharp contrast to how she behaves in the real world.
Mm-hmm.
So there's three Heathers, and they are the most popular girls in school, of course. They're mean girls in the Mean Girls before Mean Girls were mean girls. They are vicious and they are monsters. And what did
Mm-hmm.
she say? So we meet them in the cafeteria, and like it is the war zone that I was like raised to fear. Is like this is what happens in a high school cafeteria, is that it is eat or be eaten, kill or be killed,
Mm-hmm.
and the mistake of sitting at the wrong table will cost you your
Yeah.
life.
Yeah, there's a lot of things I think we were prepared for by 80s movies or pop fiction that didn't quite turn out to be as big a deal when we got to high school or, in hindsight. I don't know. I don't think I ever cared about what ever happened in a cafeteria. I don't know if I even ate in a cafeteria.
No, I never did. But I think I would like avoided the cafeteria like the plague because it was like, well, that's where they get you.
And then also quicksand didn't turn out to be as big of a problem as I thought it
Right.
would.
Cafeterias and quicksand are among
Mhm.
the things. They're not the only things, but they're among the things.
Among many things.
And so like the Heathers and the jocks are like who rule this school, and they are out to destroy anyone and everyone for no reason. So the first thing that happens, or among the first thing that happens, is that they write a note. Apparently Winona Ryder, who's Veronica, can copy anyone's handwriting. So she
Mhm.
writes a note from the head jock to a nerdy girl being like, I love you and you're the greatest, and let's be a boyfriend girlfriend. And Veronica's like, let's not. I don't have anything against this poor girl. And all
Mhm.
Heather has to do is be like, well, just I said so. And then she's like, well, okay. And she does it. And that's kind of the real world Veronica. Seems like she's not one of the Heathers, or wants to seem like she's not one of the Heathers, but she is. She does what they
Yeah, she's
want.
complicit.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And she shows her early aptitude for manipulating people through forgery.
Yes. And but yeah, she's doing all of the things that the Heathers are doing. Like there's a scene right after this where she's helping Shannon Doherty, who is one of the Heathers, commit her bulimia, which is not something that I think is real. If you're going to be bulimic, just logistically, if you shove your fingers down someone else's throat, you're getting barf on your very long, very bulky blazer sleeves. That's just not practical.
They could have done with more
Yeah,
research.
exactly. It's just not like, tell us she's bulimic, cool, but I don't believe that Winona Ryder is going to help her to with that transaction. But there we go, another trigger warning: casual eating disorders. And the friends are just as mean to each other. You know, the Heathers are just as mean to each other as they are to everyone else.
Mhm.
There's no like love and support among Heathers is.
Right.
Um
Yeah, this movie was intended to be shocking, but for everyone to deal with it like it's an everyday thing, you know?
right.
That's where the black comedy, the subversive comedy comes from, is that no one in the world is particularly shocked by any of this.
Mhm.
You know, whether it being murders, suicides, anything. Everyone kind of takes it in stride, almost kind of like they are in a Tim Burton or John Waters reality.
Yes, exactly. But this does not have the fun or the alternate reality, I think, of a John Waters or a Tim Burton. Like they're trying to be that, and for me, there's something missing and they don't achieve it. And maybe it's just how hard it is to view this like rape culture and school violence as like being hilarious in an age where it's too real. But yeah, it this movie was not highly digestible to me. Certainly not in the way that it was in, the 90s when I was a teenage girl watching it.
Well, I remember the edge, the sharpness or the edge of this movie being sharper back when I first saw it.
Ooh, I feel the opposite.
I felt like it was edgier and smarter when I first watched it, and then now, um, it feels soft. It feels a little more softball. I mean, but maybe it's only compared because of all the things we've seen on cable TV now,
Mhm. Yeah, no, I felt exactly the opposite. I felt like it was too dark and uh too much of the bad thing that became an overwhelming force. It seems satirical in 1988, but then it became real life, right? Uh,
Mhm.
so like her quote in this cafeteria scene is like, "Real life sucks losers dry. If you want to fuck with the eagles, you have to learn to fly." And it's like, who wants to fuck with eagles? Like that's not what? Okay. So then we meet Christian Slater. And this is kind of what I mean is that he's like sort of grumpy, sarcastic, like big jacket
Mhm.
weirdo in the corner who's like, "Oh, I'm too badass to be in any one particular group. And his name is Jason Dean. Like, let's put our finger right on top of it. Like he's like this rebel without a cause type, right? And she's like immediately attracted to him, and he's like doing his Christian Slater thing, and it's like it's supposed to seem like he's so cute and dangerous, but like, my 2022 brain is just like, danger, that is a red flag, that is a very bad person. Like, get
Mhm.
away from him, it's not
Mhm.
a cute bad boy.
Yeah. I think by his name and by his kind of like how he enters the world, we're meant to think that he's a James Dean type,
Hmm.
that he's a rebel, that everyone else is kind of playing by these rules, and it's like, okay, great, then she can kind of escape by by hooking up with this rebel, but that's just kind of a narrative tool so that we eventually learn that he's not that he's more than just a rebel. He's also a
He
psychopath.
is a murderer.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And this is really his Christian Slater's breakout role,
Mm.
you know.
So, speaking of Christian Slater, I do have an autographed picture of him on my desk that I sent away for in this era of being like, "Oh, Christian Slater." Like, he was so sarcastic and bad, and like, in all of these movies except for the one where he's got a baboon heart, like he was always the person who was like so above it all and always had a funny thing to say. There's a really terrible, I think, 90s movies called Cuffs. Are you familiar with that?
No. Well, I've seen the box art, but I haven't seen the movie.
It's terrible. It's
Yeah.
not good. But he plays like, it's from 1992, and he plays a cop who like doesn't play by the rules and blah blah blah. And I was just like, I was
Mm-hmm.
into it. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, older me regrets those feelings, but what can I do? Hormones are what they are. So, but like as soon as we meet him and he is seen talking to Veronica and the Heathers, the jocks decide that they're going to go scare the shit out of him. And they're like, "Should we actually beat him up?" And the one jock is like, "No, we're seniors now. Like we have to be mature. Let's not actually beat him up. Let's just threaten him and call him the 3-letter F word." Um and so, like, as a result to these threats, which we have to assume work really well on the rest of the population of this school, he shoots them.
Yes.
And then they're just like, "Oh, it was blanks. Ha ha ha." Like, he didn't even get suspended or expelled. And he shot 2 kids with a gun.
Yeah, we immediately are clued in that this is an alternate, exaggerated reality just by the way that everyone behaves. And this is really where it's kind of testing that boundary and that believability. And you have to buy into it or stop watching the movie, basically, at this point.
Yeah. Well, and her parents sort of say it all because they're just like, nothing is real to them, nothing is true to them. Like they see
Mm-hmm.
everything from at arm's length, everything's a joke and nothing is a joke. So,
Yeah, they're perpetually always at breakfast reading newspapers,
and just quipping,
Mm-hmm.
and so this, like, the fact that he like pretended to shoot these 2 boys just makes Winona Ryder even more intrigued by
Mm-hmm.
Jason Dean or whatever. And she's just like, "Oh, how cute. He pretended to shoot 2 kids. I'm in love." And like, yeah, that just for me is too, like, any kind of like gun violence in a school is just like, no, thank you. I don't, it doesn't work anymore, and the jocks are terrible. Like they do a good job of making them terrible. Everything about them is rape culture. Everything about them is that, like, the letter on their Letterman's jackets should be RC for rape culture. That's what they represent. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, like there's a lot of quotes. It's like, "Oh, did you have a brain tumor for breakfast? Oh, great pate, mom and dad, but I got a motor." Like it's a lot of that. Um
Mm-hmm.
they're going to a party at the Remington College where the college boys are, and like Veronica, it's supposed to be, this is like her debut at a Remington party or something. So she hasn't been friends with the Heathers for very long. Like we get the idea that she is new to being included in the Heathers, because she has this like old friend who she is like nice to still, and she's never been to one of these parties. So she's about to go. She meets Kristen Slater at the um Quickie Mart or whatever, the convenience store, and he's like, everywhere you go there's a convenience store and I move around all the time. That's why I'm so edgy.
Mm-hmm.
So then we go to the party, and it's just like literally the boy that brought Heather Chandler is just there. She's there so that he can get his blowjob. And then it's assumed that like the friend will be blowjobbing the other friend, right? It's like, that's your role. We brought you high school kid to this college party, and now you owe us sex. And she gets really sick, and it's like either she's had too much to drink, or like perhaps she's even been roofied. I don't know. Like as an adult, I was like, oh, maybe she's been a little roofied because she gets really sick really quickly.
Mm.
What are your thoughts? Because they sort of also imply that the boy who's supposed to be Winona Ryder's boy is like off doing coke behind a pillar.
Right. I have to confess, I completely was not paying attention at
Oh,
that
okay.
point. Just at that specific point, not for the whole movie, but I just remember looking up. She's in bed, and then Winona Ryder and Christian Slater are basically preparing a wake up cocktail for
Yeah.
her, slash suicide
Yeah.
kit.
Well, and so before this, at the convenience store, she has this moment with Christian Slater where she's like, "Oh, my problem is I don't really like my friends. It's like our job is to be popular." And he's like, "Yeah, that's pretty shitty." And she's like, "Yeah, oh well, off to this party." And then when she gets sick at the party, like she like barfs all over. Like she tells her friend, she tells Heather Chandler, "I'm sick and I need to go." And Heather's like, "No, fuck you." Like literally, "We're not leaving and you're not embarrassing me." She throws up all over the floor. And then Heather Chandler is like, basically like, "You owe me. Owe me for your popularity. I brought you to this party and like you threw up and now I'm embarrassed. I'm going to destroy you." And so that's why she's so mad at Heather Chandler.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
and so then that very night, that same night, she leaves the party, writes in her diary, "I must stop Heather." She calls them all swatch dogs and diet cokeheads.
That was pretty
Yeah.
good.
And she also calls Heather a coos. Or no, she calls her a coos. "You're being a coos." It's like, what? But at this point, though, the dialogue is too much, right? When Heather Chandler and Heather and Veronica are standing in the alley, and she's like, we're gonna destroy you at this school, and they're not gonna let you play in their reindeer games. And she's like, "Look it up, baby." It's like, who wrote this? This seems like it's supposed to be a bad play. And it is a musical. It was turned into a musical. And I was like, well, that makes sense. This is how people talk to each other in a musical. Anyway, so she gets sick. They have this fight. She goes home to her house. She writes in her diary, someone has to destroy Heather Chandler. Christian Slater comes and knocks on her window, and they have croquet field sex. And they're now in it to win it together, right?
Yeah, they took the train to Pound Town,
Mm-hmm.
and we think that this is the road to her redemption. But boy, are we wrong.
That's right. Because the plan that they make, they say they're going to kill her. Like, we're going to go and kill her and we'll poison her and we'll make her drink Drano. But then also, Winona Ryder's like, let's put Coke in soup. Ha ha ha. Let's put milk in orange juice or whatever. And they put 2 cups on the counter, one that has milk and orange juice, and one that has Drano.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a little bit of like, oh, does Winona Ryder know which cup she has? Does Christian Slater know
Right.
which cup he has?
Yeah, I think it's implied that she reached for the wrong cup and he noticed and was not interested at all in correcting her. He wanted to see how this would unfold.
Right. And they get her. She's not at all surprised that she wakes up and her frenemies are in her home.
Right.
She's just like, okay, this is what's happening now, I guess. And he's like, oh, well, it's, this hangover cure is too intense for you. I knew it would be. And that's all the convincing she needs to like take the cup from his hand, not even look and see what's in it.
Mm-hmm.
And
You're not cool enough to drink this.
it works. She drinks it down in one gulp, chokes twice, and falls through her
She
coffee
drinks from an
table.
empty she drinks from an empty cup in the scene. Well, this is like a pet peeve of mine, but it makes sense. Like if you're doing so many takes.
You can't keep drinking liquid?
Well, yeah, if you're doing like 10 takes, you don't want them to they can't drink from the a full glass of water or whatever you've got in there. Plus it looks like she's got like blue dye in her on her tongue.
She does, yeah, in her teeth and on her tongue, yeah.
Yeah.
But she like stumbles around and falls through the glass coffee table that's in her room,
Mhm.
and she's dead. And they're like, "Ugh, she's dead. That's it." They're like, "Oh God, well, oops, what do we do now?" And Veronica forges the note, and that's it. It's very low key. Like there's no like
Mhm.
shock and or awe.
There's not a lot. Yeah, there's not a lot of like, "Oh my god, are the police now going to catch
Mm-hmm.
us?"
They've put their fingerprints on everything, including the cup.
Yes, exactly. And the police, I guess, are not very good at doing their
No.
job. And everyone totally accepts the suicide for a suicide or the murder as a suicide.
Right.
And It then begins, instead of closing doors, it starts opening doors.
Mhm.
It's like, well, we got away with it. And if anything, like the dialogue now at the school begins like about suicide, and like people are upset that this Heather died, but it really kind of then begins to kind of shine a light on everyone's kind of need for attention, and them each worrying about their own kind of little thing. And if anything, it starts making, it starts churning the pot to where Christian Slater and Winona Ryder think about escalating, or at least Christian does.
Right. Well, and this is the point where I start to think like this is maybe a precursor to like a Fight Club scenario,
Yes. Yeah. I,
because
I like that comparison.
yeah,
Yeah.
because Winona Ryder really is the instigator. Like her character like walks this waffling line of like being a murderer and being complicit and being a part of all of these eventual murders and suicides, and but then being like, oh no, I didn't know, and you tricked me, and this is all your fault, Christian Slater, in a way where it's like, if this movie could get
Hmm.
away with it, it would be much smarter now to be like, there was no Christian Slater, honey. That was just like you pr- creating this persona of somebody who could do and be the things that you in your heart truly want to do and be. Like you're pretending that you're too smart to be one of the Heathers, and you're pretending that you care about, Martha Dump Truck and your old friend Sally or whatever. But no, like this is all your fault.
Right. It's almost like he is a mythological trickster
Right.
that has appeared to to grant her wish, for her to only then realize she didn't actually want this wish.
I would like that better. Like
Like a drop dead Fred version
exactly.
of ugh.
A Fight Club, a Drop Dead Fred. I needed this movie to point the finger more directly at Winona Ryder and be like, no, this is you.
Mhm.
You are the
Mhm.
bad. Like it's a world of bad people, but you are among the worst of them.
Mhm. I'm glad that they didn't go with anything supernatural, but if she had taken a little more responsibility, that's not something I would have minded.
Yeah.
Whether maybe her being arrested at the end.
Like yeah, I agree.
Hmm.
So like yeah, at the funeral we now hear everybody's thoughts, and their thoughts are like, well, who knew who knew Heather
Hmm.
Chandler had any problems
Which
at
is a
all?
great comedic device.
It is,
Yeah.
because then you've got the jocks being like, "Why would God choose to kill such hot snatch?" And you're like, "Ew, I hate these guys." And then they beat up the nerds in this very next scene, and
Hmm.
there's a lot of, three-letter F word, and it's like, okay, like the level of homophobia in this movie, I think is meant to be satirical, but it's just
Hmm.
too real, and it's like, okay, enough. This is what is like needs to be that whole scene needs to be cut from this movie. They go cow tipping, like medium Heather wants Veronica to go on a cow tipping date. They go with these two terrible jocks, and they spread the word the next day. It's like there's a mean girl vacuum, right? So because there's no
Right.
Heather Chandler anymore, everyone's like, oh, it's lawless society. They're spreading rumors that Veronica had sex with the gross jock guy. Everybody's being mean now to see who gets to be the next Heather Chandler. um and so Christian Slater and Winona Ryder hatch a plan to um, stage a murder suicide between the two jocks and shoot them with bullets that don't really kill you.
Right. They're tranquilizer bullets, or they just give the appearance that they've been shot.
Which, like, okay, he did shoot two kids successfully with blanks at the beginning of this movie.
Right.
So
Exactly.
maybe she believes him, but also as he says later, you believed me that I have magic bullets that don't really kill people with you're in
Well, I
it,
thought, and, but earlier in the movie, you.
Right. So she does. She lures them both there to like have sex. She has them take off their clothes, and they're going to leave behind these, and I'm quoting the movie here, homosexual artifacts that were like very, very upsetting. And she forges a note, of course, saying we love each other and we can't live in this world where we can't be our real authentic selves. And like she shoots the first one right in like
Yeah,
point
yeah,
blank.
she shoots him. Oh, she's about 6 feet away. Yeah, she shoots him right in the neck, and bam, he's out.
Yep.
And then she's starting to realize something's wrong. The jock realizes something wrong and bolts for it. And then she can tell by Christian Slater's, because she's laughing and it's like, oh, let him go, it was worth it, it was hilarious, because she's still under the impression that that these were blanks, or that they were not real bullets.
Mm-hmm.
And then by Christian Slater's attitude of like, no, we gotta hunt him
Yeah.
down
This is
before he gets
bad.
away.
Yeah.
Yeah, the question marks start to appear over her head.
Okay, so then we see the bad cops and why there's no investigations happening, because they're like, oh, there's a bag full
Mhm.
of homosexual artifacts. Let's
Yeah,
look
and
no
they're
further.
totally like smoking a joint
Mhm.
in the car.
And they're not investigating at all, because they see Christian Slater and Winona Ryder and they're just like pretending to make out, and they're like, well, let's not investigate. Clearly these are homosexual artifacts, and let's just believe what the thing is telling us and look no further.
Mhm.
Then finally Christian Slater is like, you believed me because you wanted to believe me. You're a murderer too. And it's true. She is her hand is on the weapon, murderer of these people.
Yeah. Yeah, even when she found out that the first dude she thought she hadn't killed was dead, when the second dude comes around back to the scene, she fires him she shoots him right in the chest.
Yeah. She is the bad guy here. The best part of this whole movie is at the funeral for the two jocks, where the dad is like, I wish he hadn't felt he had to take his own life because I love him. He was my son no matter what. I love my dead gay son. That quote is in
Mhm.
the trailer.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's funny. It's like it's originally played
Laugh.
for laughs, but I think it was also intended to have humanity to it. But it now lends much more humanity
Mm-hmm.
these days. Uh,
So she's wearing a monocle and writing in her diary that she can't control herself around JD. Like, she's literally in her diary blaming him when it's her fault. She breaks up with him, and now Heather Duke has started to rise up through the ether and become the evil.
And this is Shannon Doherty.
Yes. With her sweet like baby face, you're just like, oh, this is the role she was born to play. And in fact, like in the Entertainment Weekly, like they did a whole series of like oral histories of 80s movies, and the one for Heather is a lot of everyone being like, Shannon Doherty was not fun to work with. Shannon Doherty did not fit in to the fun we were trying to have on set. Shannon Doherty apparently didn't know it was a comedy and cried when she saw it because she thought she was making a different movie.
That's great.
Anyway, get crucial. We've got they listen to a show called Hot Probs on the radio. It's like a call-in advice show for teens.
Right. Like a love line.
Like a love line, and like Love Line, run by a middle-aged man. And the Heather and Veronica hear the other remaining Heather saying she's sad.
Yeah, we start to, now that all of this shit has gotten real, the other blonde Heather starts to become more of a sympathetic figure of someone who doesn't want to have to deal with any of this stuff anymore. And also because now, so we've now had more suicides. Suicide becomes a very topical issue at the school,
Yeah, and in such a way that it is like, oh,
But
if you kill yourself, then all of a sudden you're popular, and it's like, ah,
yeah,
no, this
yeah, it like all these things, like it doesn't. It's like it doesn't like make people stop and consider what they should. Instead, it becomes again a game of
right.
popularity.
It's that like if everyone jumped off a bridge, would you jump off a bridge? And like the honest answer we get is probably, yeah, yes, I
Yeah.
would.
Hmm.
Yeah, poor Martha dump truck like walks into traffic to try and kill herself because she is being mercilessly bullied um by everybody in the school. um and the other Heather, the second blonde Heather, tries to kill herself in the bathroom of the school, where
Right.
of course,
With a bottle full of
mm-hmm,
pills.
and Winona Ryder is like, don't do it, and she's like, suicide is a private thing, but she's in the school bathroom. And like then
Hmm.
we get finally the she says, like, if everyone jumped off a bridge, would you do it? Yes, she would. And it's like, you can't be happy all the time. Look, we understand, you can't be happy all the time. If you were happy all the time, you wouldn't be a human being, you'd be a game show host. That's the quote.
And then we meet the dad, don't we? Christian Slater's
Yes,
dad.
we've met him once before, but
Yeah.
we see him again.
And he seemed a little
Yeah.
off, like he had a secret.
And
What's his
oh,
deal?
no,
Like, is
definitely. They're
he?
killing people all
Yeah,
over the world, these two. Like, they are
yeah,
serial killers that go from town to town. Father-son traveling
yeah,
duo.
yeah. This is as we escalate. Um, our view of Christian Slater. We realize that the dad bombs buildings and films it and rewatches
Yeah.
the buildings he
In a
bombed.
very
And
creepy
what happened?
way.
I mean, you got to have a trophy afterwards. I mean, the video makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. But yeah, we learn that Christian Slater's mom couldn't take it anymore and ran inside a building right before it blew up. She knew what she was doing.
That's what he says. Or that's what Christian Slater
Hmm.
says. But yeah, there's
Yeah.
definitely a weird, these guys are not, it's big red flags. And so at this point, Christian Slater is sort of stalking her, and she's sort of into it in that 80s movies way where it's like, yeah, no, stalk her and she'll fall back in love with you. But he's also like partially in league with Shannon Doherty's Heather, because
Right.
he's gonna hide the evidence that he somehow has that she was once friends with Martha Dump Truck, in exchange for getting everyone in school to sign a petition.
Hmm. Yeah. We're suspecting that he now has like his plans are expanding,
Mm-hmm.
and they no longer, again, it's kind of like Fight Club, like it no longer involves Winona Ryder anymore. Like, we've got to take Fight Club up to the next
Which,
level.
yeah, which
You know.
eventually does lead them to blowing up buildings and stuff. So it is like the same path of escalation. Who knew?
Hmm.
This is a spiritual prequel to Fight Club.
Yeah, like in Fight Club, there's a point to where he can't go on anymore, but his alter ego must go on, so he's not in loop on the plans anymore.
Right. And that's kind of the idea of what we get is happening here.
Yeah.
So, but then they are going to together. She falls right back into it. They're gonna go murder Heather Duke, and he's like got her copy of Moby Dick, and he's
Hmm.
just been like underlining passages and like circling passages and crossing things up out. And there's this really disturbing thing where he circles the word Eskimo, which is, like, as we know in these modern times, an offensive slur. And they make a like big joke out of it being meaningful somehow. Anyway, he pulls a knife out of the dishwasher, and she's like, it's dirty. And he's like, I'm not gonna take out her tonsils, we're gonna kill her. And they do.
But do they though? I think it ends up being a dream, because the funeral we see is so ridiculous, and later we see Shannon Doherty
Alive. Yeah.
in Alive. Yeah.
Yeah, and it is like it's in the dream original Heather Chandler is like, "Oh, there was a better turnout at my funeral." And um
Hmm.
but I think the most meaningful part in it is like she's like, "Well, I won't write the note. You can't get me to write the note. And without the note, you have nothing." And he's like, "Nobody cares." He just scribbles, "Life sucks," right?
Hmm.
And he's like, "Nobody cares. Obviously, haven't you learned anything? Nobody is looking that closely. It truly doesn't matter." But I did think it was weird, like, every kid's bedroom in this movie is like a whole studio apartment. Like they've got living room sets, and
Hmm.
everybody's got like a coffee table in their bedroom. I just thought that was so weird. And then we get more diary, the CIA, the FBI, the PTA. No one can stop JD. So she's gonna commit suicide. Like she writes her own little suicide note and hangs herself.
Right. Winona Ryder.
Hanging from a sheet. So JD comes over and is like, "Oh, well, I was going to kill you, but I see you've already killed yourself. Very well, let me reveal my plan."
And then, aha! Winona Ryder staged her suicide.
She did, which, like, did she know he was going to come over? Like, that just doesn't track for me. And also, like, her mom sees her, and it's like, your trauma like, the trauma that you're causing to your mom
Hmm.
is not worth possibly tricking JD, but anyway, it works.
Yeah. No, she totally saw it coming.
Yeah.
She totally saw that Christian Slater was going to take it to that next level.
Yeah.
And she had to get in front of it before it happened.
Yeah, so her mom walks in on her fake suicide and she just picks her head up and she's like, "Hey mom, why so tense?" Anyway, Christian Slater's going to blow up the school at the pep rally where everyone's there. He says the mass suicide is going to be a Woodstock for the 80s. But instead of calling someone or doing anything, she just charges down to the school and she's going to stop him and stop the bomb. So they have this whole like confrontation in the boiler room, or like, what is it, like a basement?
Yeah, the boiler room basement. The basement and the boiler room in the basement.
And they're just fighting. And they're like having this like big fight over like, well, how do I defuse the bomb? Like, and she thinks he's going to tell her the truth, whatever. Like that whole scene to me just didn't really track. She does stop the bomb. She walks out of the school and she thinks she killed him. We all think that she killed him.
Right, because she shot him in the chest
and the stomach and the hand. Like she shot him many times. No one heard any of this. It's definitely a soundproof basement. No one's like, "What?" Pep rally's happening. And if she just like walks out and she's all like sort of bloody and singy and she's like gonna smoke a cigarette, and then JD sort of comes stumbling out. He's not dead. But he's gonna bomb himself, which I didn't get at first. But that's his plan. He's gonna blow himself up. And she just walks away, and that's what happens.
I think the Fight Club analogy is hard to get away from now. She's really at the end vanquishing that part of her that wanted revenge, that's not willing to let go, and would rather make a statement of their own destruction than have to be responsible for all the stuff. Because at that point he's defeated. He has no more power over her.
Right. And we're supposed to also believe that she is redeemed because she makes an effort to reach out to like Martha and her friend from before.
To be fair, she only killed like half of those people herself.
Well, she's definitely gonna need some psychological mental health attention after this. I don't know. Like obviously there's nothing in this movie that's meant to be like in any way real. But to me, the problems that they're presenting are now too real. Like, did you see the Batman, the most recent Robert Pattinson Batman? Like, what did you think of it?
I really
I
liked
did
it.
too.
Yeah.
But except for one fact, that the fact that the big bad is sort of like, it's two things, right? So on the one hand, we
Mhm.
have to believe that you can set off a series of explosions that will flood all of Gotham. We have
Right.
to believe that. Okay, cool. That's a Batman problem I can get behind because it makes no sense and it's not real. Like in the real world, there's no city that is like, susceptible to being flooded by flipping one switch, right? Okay, that's a Batman problem. The group of incels that are like incited by internet blogging to come and be like active shooters at a public event, that's
Mhm.
not a Batman problem. That's a real world thing. And that to me was just too scary to like
Mm.
continue buying into the Batman of it all. Does that make
Mm.
sense? It's like,
Yeah, I could see how you could feel that. Yeah, it didn't have that effect on
mm,
me. It definitely amped things up in terms of the real world parallels and
yeah.
the darkness of it.
Mhm.
It was definitely something that I absorbed
Mhm.
and didn't treat as just popcorn fare.
Right.
It was definitely something that had a real world impact on me. But one of the things I also liked about that movie, now that we're just talking about the Batman, is that how and and it's gonna touch in on Heather's, but how like all the previous incarnations and even the advertising for the Batman was "I am
Yeah.
vengeance," and we're supposed to feel great about
Right.
that. And then eventually that becomes, and then he does that. He starts off that way, and then the villain starts using that same phrase, "I am
Mhm.
vengeance," and slowly Batman comes around and realizes he's got to be more than just that.
Right.
He's got to be he's got to he has to take care of people.
Mhm.
He has to help out. And yeah, so he has to make that switch from what is expected of kind of a movie villain, a movie hero, of just beating the crap out of people,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah, we needed that in this, and I don't think we got it as much.
It's there, but yeah, we don't get it as much. Like her redemption is ultimately befriending the person at the bottom of the social ladder,
Mhm. But
and say, let's hang
we
out,
don't have any, like, there's no answer for like at the end of Fight Club, does he get arrested, or I'm not sure, like, at least.
It's yeah, the movie ends before
Okay.
that. The movie ends before that.
But yeah, like, to me, watching this as an adult who has a child who is a junior in high school, it's like, nope. This is too real. Like, like suicide among teenagers is real, and it's like far too upsetting to be this hilariously made into a joke, which is another movie that I think I really like is Better Off Dead, which is a John Cusack comedy where like
Mm,
the joke is that he's depressed that his girlfriend broke up with him and he's gonna kill himself in all these delightful ways. I don't know
mm.
if I watch that as an adult if I'm gonna be able to like laugh.
Right. Well, I feel like one of the things about this movie is that you're either in on or you're not, is the
Yeah.
satire. And it sounds like you felt the aspects that are all too real in today's life, very personally, like that you couldn't chalk it up to satire. Whereas I don't have teenage kids,
Mhm.
and it's easier for me to look at it as a concept
Yeah.
rather than something that I actually have
Worry
to deal
about?
with
Yeah.
and worry about. Yeah, absolutely. Like
It's true.
you know
It's true.
and I fully acknowledge it. Like, I'm able to accept it as a dark satire.
Mhm.
My problem with the movie is it's just a lot slower, and in some ways it seems a less edgy or sharp these days, you
Okay.
know?
And I think that's a really
Um
interesting different take than what I had. Yeah, for
Mhm,
sure. Is that, I can't look at a lot of these movies and be like, "Oh god, yeah, eye roll, that was the culture."
mhm,
It's like,
mhm,
"Okay." And maybe like ugh, I just can't. I couldn't see you putting this movie up in a like, hey, let's have a big revival and let's all go watch Heather's, because everyone would
mhm,
be like, this is about school violence. You can't like, and
mhm.
we can't laugh at that anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the audience for this movie is very
Yeah.
specific, you know? Because here you have a rated R movie that is meant for people who can't see rated R
Mm-hmm.
movies, at least, who are teenagers. This is meant for teenagers who are experiencing this drama and want to subvert
Yeah.
it. And it's for if you had to pinpoint the kind of um the people, the audience for this movie, it's the people who are going to sneak off to see
Mm-hmm.
a movie they shouldn't see,
Mm-hmm.
whether renting it or in the theater. And it in itself is a subversive act to see a subversive story.
Yes. Yes. And I can totally put myself back in those shoes, and I can put myself back in those plaid 20-hole Doc Martens of my,
Hmm.
1997 self, who is seeing this movie, of course, on like VHS and being like, "Oh, it's so bad," and it's so bad in such a good way, and oh,
Hmm.
I'm in love
Yeah,
with
I
Winona Ryder and
absolutely
JD,
can. I totally get that this is some. I can totally get that this is some people's favorite
Yeah.
movie. I can totally see that. And it just, for a number of reasons, just doesn't connect with me anymore. But watching it, I can still appreciate what these people connect
Yeah.
with. You know?
Agree, and it's the same thing with 16 Candles. Like, 16 Candles, I
Yeah.
know, is a lot of people's favorite movie, who are ride or die for Jake Ryan. I can see a lot of
Hmm.
people being
Hmm.
ride or die for Jason Dean, and okay, but, if a part of the point of what we're doing here is to, like, look at it and say
From our aged perspective,
from our geriatric millennial
right?
POV, like,
Removing our monocles.
and looking up from our diary, I have to
Right.
say, like, this movie did not work for me, and I'm glad that, like, based on circumstances, I'm glad that I didn't try to watch it with my kids, and
Mm.
just, like,
Yeah,
watched it
I'd
by
be
myself.
fascinated. Yeah, well, this is the kind of movie that you shouldn't watch with your parents.
Yeah,
This is the kind of movie that, um, not to give any gender bias, but this, I feel like, is more of a, the people that I know that love this movie are almost universally women.
yeah.
And I this is the kind of movie that you secretly watch in your room when your parents don't know it.
Mm,
You know,
mhm.
this is the kind of movie that you watch with your friends, and you feel like you're getting something, like you're a rebel, like you're getting away with
Oh,
something.
yeah, and I definitely did. Although I would, like, be very interested to know, like, what my 16-year-old's hot takes would be. Um
Oh yeah, that would be, that would be
But
fascinating.
not no interest, no interest. I don't think, like, and as much as they were like, "Oh, 30th anniversary, like, oral history, this is the best movie we've ever made about this is the best movie ever made about teenagers, and this is the best comedy about
Hmm.
high school." Don't disagree. Don't agree. Um, it did not for me hold up. So let's just say on a scale of like 1 croquet mallet to 10 croquet mallets,
Hmm.
I think we're gonna differ wildly, so I want you to go first.
I think we're going to differ, but not
Okay.
wildly. I don't think we're good. So I'm fascinated. I want to hear what your take
Okay.
is first.
Yeah, so I'm gonna give it the same thing that I gave 16 Candles, which is, although I think 16, I was going to say I almost think 16 Candles is a better movie. I don't. I think Heathers is a better movie.
Yeah,
I,
I would say so too.
but
Yeah.
I'm going to still give it 4 because I don't think it holds up. I don't think it holds up. I
Mhm.
think that there are some gems in there. There's some moments with
Yes,
Winona Ryder
absolutely.
that are just where she is precious, and there are moments with Christian Slater where his appeal is undeniable. And there are some funny moments of dialogue. And there are some things where you'd be like, okay, well, yeah, that's funny commentary or whatever, but there's not enough of it to be able to accept the other things which have not aged as well for me.
Mm-hmm. So for me, I'm gonna give it I think the classic Nathan 6.5.
Yeah, that is your classic. That is like I think your most
Of like
given rating.
right, which is this viewing didn't quite do much for me, but I still respect it.
Okay.
You know, like I can't give it I have to give it a tip of the hat.
Okay.
I can't disrespect what it either used to mean to me or what it means to other people, but I feel like it just doesn't connect with me who I am now.
Yeah.
And so I 100% get, like, I feel like this is in the same kind of category as a Buckaroo Banzai.
Really?
To where, which is like the people who loved it then, there is no way to dissuade them
From loving it now. Absolutely. That's
for unloving it or loving it now. Like there's no way to dissuade them from that. And the things that they love about it are now like in their DNA, you know? And then, but coming at it from an objective standpoint of someone who didn't have that connection back then with that movie, can still see it and appreciate it for what it is. It just doesn't. Oh, I don't have the same emotional reaction.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I think that's fair. And I don't see it popping up a lot, which like when I first was like, oh, let's do Heathers. Oh, why don't I see it popping up more? Well, this is why. Because it doesn't need to. Okay. So what is your deep cut recommendation? I think
well, dang it all, we kind
Fight
of
Club,
made
right?
the case for
Yeah.
Fight Club. Like no matter what, like I feel like some of the best. So there's like deep cut recommendations. If you love this, then go one step further with this. But I feel like a Heather's Fight Club double feature is just waiting to happen. You know, like that's the best experiences to see them back to back as a double feature.
I think too, like Fight Club has sort of the same end.
Yeah, I would go
same
Heather's.
aftertaste.
I'd go Heather's then Fight Club because
it's chronological, but also like Fight Club has that like, oh, at first you think you're seeing this like, and it is a great film. It's I like Fight Club, but then afterwards when you watch it again and you're like, ew, like I don't like what the actual message of this is. Like the about of this movie is not underneath it all is not what you think it is when you first watch it, which is like, yeah, fuck IKEA. There's so much something so much more visceral than getting your furniture from a catalog. Okay, but that's not really what the movie is about. And when you watch it again with like modern eyes, to be like, oh, it's not what I thought it was, and I don't like what it actually is. I would also
I love Fight Club.
I love Fight Club too. Like I was so blown away by the filmmaking of Fight Club.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And there are things in that movie that are undeniably cool and will never not be. And the performance is amazing. But then when you get down to like the message that people took away from that movie, it's tough.
Well, it's not to steer totally into Fight Club again, but there are so many movies out there that it's about, like, the classic example to me is Wall Street.
Mm,
Like, it is about the opposite of what many of the it's like it becomes an anthem to the dickheads who the movie is trying to lampoon,
exactly.
you know? And in the movie, it clearly is saying that these guys are the bad guys, that the, like in Wall Street, like, these guys are the scum. This is the warning, but then the people who can't see past that see it as an
Right,
anthem.
exactly. Greed is good. Yeah, it is. Greed is good. You're not a snowflake. Yeah, let's call everyone snowflakes from now on. It's like, wait. There's something underneath here you're not getting.
Wait,
Um,
we're not supposed to like
yeah,
that.
exactly.
Yeah.
Like, uh-oh.
Did you only see the YouTube clip?
Yes.
You know?
I don't not
But yeah, no, I would say yeah, I would say if you love this movie, I would go the direction, and it's hard for me to just generally say this, but like, John
mm,
Waters. It's
like a
like has a
crybaby, maybe?
yeah, like a crybaby. It's it's that both of that subversiveness, the black humor, but yet almost kind of like a kitschy 50s, 60s like art direction
Mm,
style, you
mhm.
know?
So my deep cut recommendation that I was gonna go for is another 80s movie called The River's Edge. Have you seen this movie? It's got Keanu Reeves and Dennis Hopper and Ione Skye, and it's like kind of based on an actual true crime, where like it's this group of like they're the burner kids, right? They're the
Mm,
burnout, left behind poor kids. And one of them murders his girlfriend, and everybody knows about it. And they're just like, well, oopsie doopsie. I guess that's that, and it's kind of like, I think it treats the like, and it's a drama. It's not necessarily a satire. It's not trying to be funny. It's trying to be like, can you believe it? These
mm,
kids like don't have any feelings. Um, so that would be my deep cut recommendation as something
mm,
to sort of be like, okay, well, I think Heather's is trying to be the comedy version of this like drama that's kind of like real.
mm, mm.
Mm, I don't know. So yeah, I wanted in my heart and soul, I wanted to give us a break from all the shoot 'em up predators and Delta forces of it all, and just
Uh-huh.
like get some comedy and a cute boy and some shoulder padded girls up in here and have a laugh riot. And it did not turn out that way. So okay.
Back to
Yeah,
violence.
we'll have to go right back to Rambo or something. You can find more about the pod at Most Excellent Pod on the Facebooks and the Instagrams. Please find us on the Instagrams. I've been putting posts up, and I would like for you to like them. And like and review the podcast as well. If you want to find more of Nathan Blackwell, you should go to
Oh, squishystudios.com.
yeah, send
Thanks.
him money somehow. And then if you want to find me, I'm at the Neighborhood Comedy Theater, the Physical Place in downtown Mesa, Arizona, and at Most Excellent Chrissy on the Media de Social. What a fun day we had, Nathan, wasn't it?
I'm sorry if we were total bummers about your favorite movie.
And please, while you're out there in the world, please remember to be excellent to each other and always to party on, dudes.
Party on, dudes. Party on,
Party on,
dudes.
dudes.